I have been thinking about sanctuary, and not only what it means to me, but for what emotions the word sanctuary brings to my heart. For me, sanctuary conjures protection, comfort, and safety from the outside, from the others. It gives me solace and time to re-energize. This place we are in, called a sanctuary, is one place where I can come for comfort, rest, peace, and support to allow me to face what is outside these doors. What I've been given here wants me to offer sanctuary to others. May we keep our doors and hearts open to those who need this precious gift. We light our chalice as a symbol of gratitude as we celebrate the abundance of our lives together. In this sanctuary, we harvest bushels of strength for one another and offer our crop with the hands of compassion and generosity. In the authentic and gentle manner of our connections, we cultivate a simple sweetness to brighten our spirits. May we be grateful for the ways we nourish and uplift each other, for it is the sharing of this hallowed time together that sustains us. Our first reading is Red Brocade by Naomi Shihab Nye. The Arabs used to say, when a stranger appears at your door, feed him for 3 days before asking who he is, where he's come from, where he's headed. That way, he'll have the strength enough to answer, or by then you'll be such good friends you don't care. Let's go back to that. Rice, pine nuts. Here, take the red brocade pillow. My child will serve water to your horse. No, I was not busy when you came. I was not preparing to be busy. That's the armor everyone puts on to pretend they had a purpose in the world. I refuse to be claimed. Your plate is waiting. We will snip fresh mint into your tea. The second reading is The Guest House by Muslim mystic poet Rumi. This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all, even if they are a crowd of sorrows, who sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still treat each guest honorably. They may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door, laughing, and invite them in. Be grateful for whatever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from the beyond.
So they had been gathering in the same place for years. Families from the neighborhood, some of whom had now moved away, and the children of whom were now grown and living all over the country. All of them, or at least most, would come back every single year for this annual camping trip among the bluffs and the small towns of Whitewater State Park. This was not their first time camping, or as some of the group described, glamping. If you're not familiar, that's glamorous camping. Coleman stoves and propane tanks, extension cords and CD players, camping chairs with footrests, battery-powered fans, pumps for air mattresses, and no hesitation for an early morning run to the coffee shop or a late afternoon run to the A&W for ice cream or to the saloon. Nonetheless, even as this was not roughing it, it was still a getaway. There was no cell phone reception among the bluffs, a place where you couldn't be reached. surrounded by hills of rock and trees, as if this annual pilgrimage made the dust of this simple campsite into sacred ground. Then there was the rituals, the ring toss and the river tubing, circles around a campfire, and little tents popped up here and there like a recreation of the old neighborhood. There was a chance of storms one night at this camping trip not long ago. So now, living in Rochester, our wimpy little immediate family decided to bring the kids back to town to sleep, looking at the forecast. The wind was picking up a little, and after we had a late supper at the campground, we packed up the things we needed for the night, said our goodbyes for the evening, and made plans to come back in the morning. We got in our car. So just outside the campground, the wind began to pick up quickly. The sky was changing tone and color like drops of food coloring just being pinched into the atmosphere, swirling in a beautiful and slightly ominous, terrifying sky. The drops of rain themselves started slow, but not for long. You know how this happens when you have to turn your windshield wipers on slow, and within a matter of seconds, they're going at full speed. My moderate speed up the hill out of the park slowed quickly as it became difficult to see the road ahead, and soon there was enough water to barely be able to see the lines on the side or in the middle of the road. Now, we had gotten up the hill and we were just a few miles from St. Charles, the first small town on the south side, so we took it easy with our flashers on, trying not to scare the children in their car seats as they looked out the window in maybe one of their earliest experiences of humble awe at nature. And we got to the good old A&W, and we parked on the side of the building that was opposite the wind. Branches were flying, water was pooling, but living in Minnesota our whole lives, we knew the difference between straight-lined winds and rotating funnel clouds, so we felt safe to stay put in shelter right there. So we waited a few minutes before the intensity died down a little bit and the storm front passed. My usual parental instinct in that moment would have been, all right, well, that's over. Let's keep driving. Let's go home. It is way past bedtime. That instinct stopped, and we knew right away we needed to turn back to our family and our friends at the campground. The road we drove back on did not look the same as how we left it. No rotating clouds or funnels, but straight-line winds, as you well know, Midwesterners, can make a lot of damage. The corn was at least at a 45-degree angle. There was a phone pole down across the road, trees down. It was a much different weaving back on this highway slowly. Luckily, nothing fully blocking the road so we could get through. So we got back to the campground, and before we got there, we could see tents had blown down. The things from the group campsite shelter were sprawled all over the place. But luckily, we found our family and friends safe, hunkered down in their vehicles, seemed to be discussing whether they wanted to pick up everything and rebuild the camp that night, or just go to the saloon again. But it was clear that picking up camp would be too much. So people piled in a couple of cars, and we weaved our way back to the highway, and then along the highway of debris, what seemed like a slow saunter back to Rochester in this caravan of pilgrims. And for that night, we sprawled out in our home on couch cushions and carpet floors. We found every old sleeping bag or sheet we could find, fitting more people into that house than we thought possible. Our house became the shelter from the storm, an indoor campground. The sacred ground that was that campsite traveled with us because we held each other and made our way through danger until we found a place that we all needed, where it was dry, where it was warm, where we were with one another. Whether it was or wasn't before, our being together now made the place holy. The moment or the separation between safety and danger, the separation between those two realities, whether it's a road or a minute or a line or a breath, between being nestled and held on sacred familiar ground and then the potential of being swept away by the wind, washed away by the rain, life as you know it flipped upside down, the separation between those two realities can be quite thin. One moment, one breath, the world changes. Being an undocumented immigrant in this country, especially for those fleeing and trying to find shelter or refuge or safe harbor, is like living right on the front edge of that storm, unsure of what is going to come next. When at one moment all was good, there with your family, there with good friends or familiar spaces, there with your children and stories in the place you hold dear, and all of a sudden something changes and the wind picks up and the rain pours down, the earth itself shakes, the sky of uncertainty opens up, and the harshness of life and a world pelt your skin and your soul. And the question is, where can you find shelter? Where can you go? And do you have time, and is it safe to gather your loved ones? Sanctuary, at times, is as simple and important as having physical shelter. Some small shelter that can grow into other important shelters in life. Stories and cultures and traditions that provide shelter, shelters built by messages of inclusion or justice or equity where you feel you can breathe and live, shelter built by acts of kindness and generosity and love, creating this invisible, portable shelter in the air that we breathe is what sanctuary can mean, to provide shelter from the storm. When a stranger appears at your door, writes the poet Naomi Shihab Nye, feed him for 3 days before even asking who he is, where he's come from, where he's headed. That way he'll have strength enough to answer, or by then you'll be such good friends, you won't care anymore. We are a sanctuary church, and among the many things that means, including education and advocacy, public witness and policy work, what being a sanctuary church means at its core is that we are willing to use our space, leverage our resources, to provide a person or a family some shelter from the storm, temporary as it is. In a long religious tradition of welcoming the stranger and loving our neighbor and being a place of refuge, both for the body, but also, and in turn, of course, for the heart and for the soul. It takes a lot in preparation to become a sanctuary church. It takes a lot of learning and reflection or thought or prayer, a lot of listening to stories, a lot of finding partners for the work, and then actually preparing the space. And that's all preparation to something else that is yet to begin. In the Jewish tradition, there are 2 practices as part of the Passover Seder that remind us of lessons of preparation and opening our homes and dwellings. The first is cleaning the house before the Seder, cleaning for Pesach, removing leavened foods, preparing the place for the meal, and also a practice in that moment, the symbolic practice of clearing out the soul, making space in the heart for something that will be sacred and nourishing. Our sanctuary policies and manuals, pages and pages and pages of how to get things done, of our committee's work of education and discernment, a congregational resolution process, partnering with organizations in the community, other churches, justice coalitions, examining every process and every detail for how we get things done is like making room and space. It's cleaning out a lack of clarity and adding some clarity, preparing our hearts and minds and physical space for the real thing that's going to happen, that's sacred and nourishing for the body and for the soul. And the other Seder ritual is pouring a cup of wine and leaving the door to the home open to expect and welcome a visit from the prophet Elijah. I found out after the 9 o'clock service, somebody shared that their mother, a Jewish woman, would also, in her practice in Germany, would leave out food by the door, would open the door and leave out food so that those in need would know that they could go to Jewish homes for food during Passover. It's also a practice not just of preparing and opening a door, but of preparing the door to the heart, to welcome in some messenger, to welcome in some presence that we're never quite sure will actually appear. But you open the door anyway, and you prepare the space anyway. Sometimes it isn't even that guests are going to be coming for the Seder, but you still create and prepare the space. It's the intention preparing something beautiful and sacred and meaningful, every nook and cranny polished, prepared, ready for whatever or whomever may come. One poet writes, "I have been preparing to be busy." At times I wonder and fear that our institutions are focused too much on end results and productivity, quantifiable statistics, that our lives are filled with expectations of proof for our worth, that our acts and practices of preparing can leave us bereft, leave us missing out, leave us preparing only to be busy. Some productive end is the only reason. Sometimes I fear that we miss the importance in preparing in and of itself, of preparing our hearts, preparing our space for some visitor, whether we have no idea if they're going to come or not. That's what sanctuary is. We have no clue. That's why the work of sanctuary is not just outcome-based, focused on measurable results, but it's about practices that can't always be proven or quantitatively effective, but can be qualitatively transformative. Thomas Merton writes, "There is a pervasive form of contemporary violence to which the idealist most easily succumbs: activism and overwork." He writes, "The rush and pressure of an activist life to allow oneself to be carried away by a multitude of conflicting concerns, to surrender to too many demands, to commit oneself to too many projects, to want to help everyone in everything is to come to spiritual violence." He says, "The frenzy of our activism neutralizes our ability to work for peace because it destroys our capacity to sustain the work." Sometimes it has to be the process, without always having tangible results. This is not to say that end results and actually having some effect on the world is not part of it or not important. But something about the work for sanctuary feels as much internal as external. The work for immigration justice is spiritually fulfilling and meaningful even in the preparation alone, because we are expanding our understanding of a more just and equitable world, even if no one comes to our door. It is the act of preparing the heart, the space, to create sanctuary within, so you have the sustainability to keep bringing sanctuary, portable little sanctuaries, out into the world and to shelter those who need it. Sanctuary everywhere is a phrase used in immigration justice work and beyond, to use whatever you can, to not become overwhelmed by all the little different things you should be doing, but do what you have the capacity to sustain, leveraging whatever resource feels that you can leverage, whether it's time or commitment, money or buildings, advocacy or witness, conversations, stories, art, music, beauty, love, because you don't have to do all of it yourself. We have to do it together and share the load to help create this intangible network, this invisible cloak of sanctuary in the atmosphere itself, this connective shelter of love and inclusion, of hope and resilience that can provide social and soulful shelter for those who live on the margins, who have been caught and are constantly caught in the storm. We sang this morning the early service to our new members, hymn number 1 in our hymnal, which says in part, "By faith made strong, these rafters will withstand the battering of the storm. This hearth, though all the world grow chill, will keep you warm." This church is a shelter in the storm. And sometimes we need to grab our umbrellas and take our little portable sanctuaries out into the world in whatever way we can, words and actions, our voice, our vote, everywhere we go, because we never know who will need shelter, when or where or how, and it may be ourselves. And sometimes the umbrellas are just not strong enough, as many as we provide and as often as we can bring them. Sometimes you have to turn back from where you thought you were heading, and you need to weave through the storm and the debris, past the downed power lines and the road filled with broken branches, and pull up alongside your loved ones who now and always should be everybody. And you open your door and you say, "Come in. I don't know if there's space, but we'll make it. There is shelter here. We'll roll out a makeshift bed on the floor, we'll turn up the heat, we'll bring you a pillow, and beyond just that, we'll cut some fresh mint into your tea, because it's not just about you being physically alive, it's about your soul being held." So you got to grab your umbrellas, and you got to grab whatever you can. Whatever commitment or time or money or energy or building, whatever it is that is sustainable for you, and bring it out into the world. And when you're not sure you have the strength or the ability to keep it going, you gather with a community that can help keep it going. And you each do what you can. And when the storm is too tough for your umbrellas and your little portable shelter, you find a place that's strong enough and built like a fortress, and you open the door, and you pray to God it isn't snowing. Or pray to whoever, But you stand there whether you know anybody is coming or not, and you prepare the space, and you say, "We will make space for you. You are welcome here. You are welcome home." May it be so. Amen. I invite you, as you are comfortable, to extend a hand to those next to you, or place a hand over your heart, and breathe deep the breath of life. Sometimes you have no idea who or what may come. And sometimes you find yourselves, or you see someone that you can call kindred, which is everyone, bracing the front of that storm. Grab your umbrella, make some shelters, and when it gets too strong, find a place that's strong enough to stand and to stay sturdy. Grab your friends, open your door, and say, "Welcome. This is your home too." May it be so. Amen.